I got married thinking I'd found my forever person. But somewhere between year 3 and year 5, my wife Grace turned into someone I didn't recognize. I'm Dean, 36, project manager at a tech company in Chicago, making $85,000 a year. Never cheated, never gambled, never did anything that would make a reasonable person walk away. But apparently being a good husband wasn't enough. The change crept in slowly like mold behind the walls. You don't see it until the damage is done. Grace started spending more time with her friend Monica. This divorced woman who seemed to have made hating men her full-time job. And suddenly, every conversation felt like I was being cross-examined by a prosecutor who'd already decided I was guilty. Her mom didn't help either, always calling at dinner with comments about how her friend's daughter married a doctor or how her neighbor's son-in-law bought a boat. Subtle digs that made it clear I wasn't measuring up. The bedroom went cold first. Not all at once, but in stages, like someone turning down a thermostat until you're shivering. She'd come to bed later and later, always with her phone, always with some excuse. And I tried to be understanding because that's what you do in a marriage, right? But understanding turned into weeks, then months. And every time I tried to initiate anything, even just holding her hand, I got the same cold shoulder, the same heavy sigh like I was some burden she had to tolerate. Monica was over constantly, at least 3 times a week, and they'd sit drinking wine and talking in those low voices that would stop the second I walked in. I'd catch snippets, complaints about husbands, about men, about how women deserve to be treated like queens. Grace started parroting these ideas, making comments about emotional labor and mental load, terms I'd never heard her use before, casting me as the villain in some story I didn't know I was part of. Her mom would video call during dinner and Grace would spend 40 minutes talking while our food got cold. And when I'd suggest calling her back later, I'd get accused of being controlling. Work became my refuge, which is sad. Looking forward to the office because at least their people treated me with basic respect. At home, I felt like I was constantly walking on eggshells, never knowing what would set her off. I started noticing things. How she'd light up when her phone buzzed, but barely acknowledge me walking through the door. How she'd spend an hour getting ready to meet Monica but wouldn't bother changing out of sweatpants for me. How our credit card had charges from stores I'd never heard of while she complained we had no money for anything fun. My brother Jake lived up in Wisconsin. We talked monthly and he'd been asking me to visit his place on the lake. Said I seemed stressed, but Grace always had some reason why I couldn't go. Then came that night in late April that changed everything. I came home around 7 o'clock tired but in a good mood because I just closed a major deal that would mean a $5,000 bonus. I walked in expecting maybe we could celebrate, go to that Italian restaurant she liked, have a normal conversation like we used to. Grace was on the couch with her laptop, didn't even look up when I said hello. I told her about the deal, about the bonus, hoping this good news would break through whatever wall she'd built. She said, "That's nice." Eyes never leaving the screen. Tone suggesting it was anything but nice. I took a shower, came back in comfortable clothes, hoping the evening would improve. I sat down next to her, left respectful space between us, and after a few minutes, I put my hand on her leg. Nothing inappropriate, just a simple touch, the kind of thing married people do. She jerked away like I'd burned her. "Don't touch me," she said, voice flat and cold. I pulled my hand back, confusion washing over me, asked what was wrong. She finally looked at me and the expression on her face was disgust. "I have self-respect," she said, emphasizing each word. "I'm not just going to let you touch me whenever you feel like it." The words hit me like a slap, not because they were loud, but because of how casual they were, how easily she turned a simple gesture into something dirty and demanding. I asked what she meant, kept my voice calm. She rolled her eyes, closed her laptop with force, stood up, and said she was going to bed. "You can sleep in the guest room tonight," she added. "I need space." Space from her husband who worked 50 hours a week to help pay for everything. Space from the man who never raised a hand to her, never insulted her, never given her any reason to treat him like a stranger. I didn't follow, didn't argue, didn't beg. I just sat there feeling something inside me crack. Not my heart exactly, more like my willingness to keep playing the role of the understanding husband who accepts whatever scraps get thrown his way. I barely slept that night. Just laid there thinking about how we'd gotten here. The next morning, Grace came out looking refreshed. Made herself coffee. Didn't offer me any. Acted like nothing happened. She started talking about meeting Monica for lunch. Needing money for new clothes. Casual conversation like we were roommates instead of married people. That's when something clicked. Call it clarity, or exhaustion from trying to make someone happy who decided being happy with me wasn't part of her plan. She asked me to transfer her $500 for shopping. Said it like you'd ask someone to pass the salt. I looked at her, really looked at her, saw the entitlement in her eyes. No, I said, simple and clear. She looked up, confusion crossing her face. I have self-respect too. The silence was deafening. You could hear the kitchen clock ticking. Could hear everything except Grace breathing because I think she'd stopped for a second. Her face went through 5 emotions in 3 seconds. Confusion, shock, anger, disbelief, and finally this cold mask. She asked what I just said. Voice quiet but dangerous. I repeated myself slower. I said, "No, I have self-respect too, and I'm not funding a lifestyle for someone who treats me like garbage in my own home." She laughed. Not a real laugh. One of those bitter sounds people make when they can't believe what they're hearing. She told me I was being ridiculous, that $500 was nothing, that I was supposed to support her. I stayed calm, told her support goes both ways, respect goes both ways. I wasn't going to be her personal ATM while she couldn't even stand me touching her. That's when she really lost it. Started yelling about how I was controlling, manipulating her with money, just like every other man. I didn't yell back, just stood there letting her rant while I finished my coffee. When she ran out of steam, I told her I was going to the gym, then to Mark's place for poker night. She demanded I cancel, said we needed to talk. I told her we could talk tomorrow, grabbed my keys, and walked out while she was still mid-sentence. That gym session was the best workout I'd had in months. Every rep felt like I was lifting off years of resentment. Every mile on the treadmill felt like I was running away from the person I'd become. This meek version of myself who'd forgotten he had a spine. Poker night at Mark's place was supposed to be my escape. Just me and 4 guys I'd known since college, sitting around a table with chips and beer. Mark lived 20 minutes from me, had a proper poker setup, and these nights happened twice a month like clockwork. I showed up around 8, feeling lighter than I had in weeks. The guys were already there. Mike, Tom, Steve, and Mark, all good people who'd watched my marriage slowly suffocate me. We played a few hands. I was actually winning, the conversation flowing easy, normal stuff that made me remember what it felt like to just be a person instead of a punching bag. Then around 9:30 my phone buzzed. A text from Grace asking where I was when I'd be home. We needed to talk. I ignored it. 10 minutes later, another text, more demanding, telling me to come home now. I put my phone on silent and focused on the game. That's when I heard the knock on Mark's door. Not friendly, aggressive pounding that made everyone look up. Mark answered it, and I heard Grace's voice before I saw her. Loud and sharp. She walked into the dining room with Monica right behind her. Both dressed like they were heading to a club, not crashing a poker game. The energy in the room died instantly. Grace looked at me with this expression of triumph mixed with anger, like she'd caught me doing something terrible instead of just playing cards. "We need to talk," she announced, not asked. Like everyone else was just scenery in her personal drama. Monica stood there with her arms crossed, nodding along. I stayed seated, didn't jump up, didn't apologize, just told her I'd be home later. We could talk then. That wasn't good enough. She started going off about how I was ignoring her, being childish, needed to grow up and face our problems instead of running away. The guys were all staring at their cards, clearly uncomfortable. Grace kept talking, her voice getting louder, saying things about our private life that had no business being aired in front of my friends, complaining about how I never listened, how I was selfish. Monica chimed in with supportive comments about how men always do this, always avoid real conversations. I let her finish, Let her say everything she needed while I just sat there, chips stacked in front of me, waiting. When she finally paused to breathe, I stood up calmly, pushed my chair back, looked at Mark, and told him I was out this hand. Then I looked at Grace. I'll be home when I'm home. The shock on her face was something I'll remember forever, like I'd violated some unwritten rule that said she could interrupt my life whenever she wanted, but I had no right to boundaries. I walked past her and Monica, grabbed my jacket, and left without looking back. I heard Grace calling after me, voice shrill now, demanding I come back, but I just kept walking, got in my car, and drove. Not home. Not yet. I drove around for 2 hours, processing how she'd actually tracked me down and tried to humiliate me in front of my friends. Brought Monica as backup like this with some intervention. When I got home around midnight, the apartment was dark. Grace was in the bedroom with the door closed, and I went straight to the guest room. The next morning started World War III. Grace was up early waiting in the kitchen, her mom on speakerphone because apparently this required reinforcements. Her mom started in immediately about how disrespectful I was, how I'd embarrassed Grace, how a real man doesn't walk out on his wife. I made coffee while they tag-teamed me. Didn't engage. Just listened to them tell me everything wrong with my character. Grace demanded I apologize. Said I owed her that much. I told them I had nothing to apologize for, that I was allowed to have friends, allowed to have time away from home, allowed to exist without constant supervision. Her mom called me selfish, Grace called me cold, and I just walked away, got ready for work, left while they were still listing my failures. This became the pattern for the next 3 weeks. Grace and her mom staging interventions. Monica always lurking in the background. All of them treating me like I was the problem that needed fixing. I started staying later at work, going to the gym more, finding excuses to not be home because home had become a war zone. I moved my stuff into the guest room permanently, stopped trying to engage with Grace beyond basic logistics about bills. She'd oscillate between being angry and trying to be sweet, like she couldn't figure out which approach would work, but I'd stopped caring. My brother Jake called during this time, said he hadn't heard from me in a while, asked if everything was okay. I told him honestly that my marriage was falling apart. He offered me his place on the lake if I needed to get away. Said the offer was always open. I thanked him, but said I had things I needed to handle first. Then came the barbecue at her sister's place in the suburbs. One of those family obligations I couldn't skip without causing a bigger scene. Her whole family was there. Her parents, her sister and brother-in-law Tom, some cousins, and of course, Monica. I showed up, brought the beer I was asked to bring, tried to be polite. Grace was performing for everyone, playing the role of the frustrated wife with the difficult husband, making little comments throughout the afternoon about how I was never home anymore, how I changed. Her mom backed her up, her sister made sympathetic noises, and Monica threw in observations about male behavior patterns. I stood there grilling burgers, listening to myself being discussed like I wasn't present. Tom pulled me aside and asked if I was okay. Said I seemed checked out. I told him honestly that I was done, that the marriage was over and everything but paperwork. He looked uncomfortable but nodded. Said he understood. The afternoon dragged on. More passive-aggressive comments from Grace. More pointed questions from her mom about our future. Finally, around 5, Grace announced she had plans with Monica later. Some concert downtown. She didn't ask if I wanted to go, didn't include me, just stated it as fact. I told her she should go ahead. I was going to stay and help clean up. She looked annoyed, but didn't argue in front of everyone. After she left with Monica, I helped Tom and her sister with the dishes, made small talk, then headed out. But I didn't go home. I drove to a coffee shop, opened my laptop, and started researching divorce attorneys in Chicago. I spent 3 hours reading reviews, comparing rates, making notes. By the time I closed my laptop, I had a short list of 5 lawyers and a clear plan. The next morning, I called the one with the best reviews. A woman named Patricia Chun, who'd been practicing family law for 20 years, set up a consultation for the following week. I didn't tell Grace, didn't mention it to anyone, just kept going through the motions while I prepared my exit. The consultation with Patricia was eye-opening. She asked detailed questions about our finances, our assets, whether we had kids, how long we'd been married. I laid it all out. The joint checking account, the apartment we rented, the 2 cars, my 401k, her student loans I'd been helping pay off. Patricia explained Illinois divorce law. Told me since we'd been married less than 10 years and had no kids, it would be relatively straightforward, likely a 50-50 split of assets, no alimony. She asked if I wanted to try counseling first. Had to ask for legal reasons, and I told her honestly the relationship was dead. She gave me homework, documents to gather, bank statements to copy, a list of everything I need to file. I left her office feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. I started looking at apartments that same weekend. Told Grace I was checking out a new gym. Drove around the city instead looking at 1-bedroom places I could afford on my salary alone. I found one in a decent neighborhood, nothing fancy, but clean and affordable, $900 a month. I told the landlord I was interested, filled out an application, and within 3 days I had approval. I signed the lease that Friday, gave first month in security deposit, got my keys, and suddenly I had an escape route. Back at the apartment, Grace barely noticed my absences. She was too busy planning some girls' trip with Monica to Atlantic City. I'd become invisible in my own marriage, and instead of fighting it, I was using it to plan my exit. I started moving things slowly. Took a carload of clothes and books to the new place while Grace was at work. Another load of kitchen stuff, my laptop and documents. Piece by piece, dismantling my presence from our shared apartment. The Friday before I was planning to serve her papers, Grace's mom showed up unannounced, let herself in with the spare key, found me in the guest room packing the last of my clothes. She stood in the doorway horrified, demanded to know what I was doing, whether I was leaving. How dare I even think about abandoning her daughter? I told her calmly that I was organizing my things, that Grace and I were having serious problems she was well aware of, and that she should probably knock before using that key, or better yet, give it back. She went off about family and commitment, and how my generation gives up too easy. I just kept packing while she talked, didn't argue, didn't explain, just let her waste her breath while I folded my last few shirts and sealed the box with tape. I served Grace the divorce papers on a Tuesday morning in mid-June. Had a process server deliver them while I was at work so I wouldn't have to see her reaction. My phone exploded around 10:17 missed calls before I finally answered. And her voice was something between screaming and crying, demanding to know what I'd done, how I could do this to her, whether this was some kind of joke. I told her calmly it wasn't a joke, that I'd moved my essential stuff to a new apartment over the past 2 weeks. That my lawyer would be in touch about dividing assets, and that she should get her own attorney. She went through all 5 stages of grief in about 3 days. Started with complete denial, telling everyone I was just having a breakdown, that I'd come back once I cleared my head. Then came the anger phase. Text messages at 2 o'clock in the morning calling me every name in the book, voicemails from her mom threatening legal action. Monica posted vague things on social media about toxic men and women dodging bullets clearly about me, and I just blocked all of them. The bargaining phase was almost sad. Grace showed up at my office 3 times in 1 week. Security had to escort her out twice. She'd cry and promise to change, say she'd go to counseling, that we could fix this if I just gave her another chance. I told her the same thing each time, that it was over. That showing up at my workplace wasn't helping her case. She tried enlisting my friends, called Mark, asking him to talk sense into me. Mark told her he supported my decision and hung up. She even called my brother Jake. Probably got his number from an old contact list. Jake told her flatly that he'd watched her treat me like garbage for 2 years, and I should have left sooner. None of it worked because everyone who actually knew us had seen how she treated me. Then came her attempted grand gesture that sealed everything in the worst possible way. It was early August, about 6 weeks after I'd served the papers, and I'd gone up to Jake's cabin in northern Wisconsin for a long weekend. Jake couldn't make it that weekend work thing, so I had the place to myself. It was perfect, remote, right on a small lake, no neighbors for half a mile. Saturday evening around 7 o'clock, I was sitting on the dock with a beer watching the sunset when I heard a car pull up. I figured maybe Jake had managed to get away, but then I heard Grace's voice calling my name, slurred and loud. She came stumbling down the path toward the dock. And I could tell from 50 feet away she was drunk, fully drunk, stumbling over roots and rocks, barely keeping her balance. She was wearing heels for some reason, completely inappropriate for a lakeside cabin, and some dress like she'd gotten ready for a night out, not a 4-hour drive to the middle of nowhere. She was crying and yelling at the same time, saying we needed to talk, that I couldn't throw away 5 years of marriage, that she loved me, and I was being cruel. I stayed on the dock, didn't move toward her, tried to calm her down from a distance, told her she shouldn't have driven in that condition, that she needed to leave. She kept coming, not watching where she was stepping, her heels catching on the wooden planks, and I saw it happening before it did, like watching a car accident in slow motion. Her foot caught on a loose board. She windmilled her arms, grabbed at nothing but air, and then she went straight sideways into the lake. The splash was enormous. Her scream cut off instantly by the cold water. I jumped in immediately, not because I wanted to help her specifically, but because letting someone drown wasn't an option, grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the shallow water. She was coughing and sputtering, too drunk to swim properly. She'd lost both heels in the water. Her phone was ruined at the bottom of the lake, her makeup running in black streams down her face. She just sat there shivering and crying, asking why I didn't love her anymore. I got her a towel and some of Jake's old clothes, told her to change and sober up. Then I called a local cab company because there was no Uber out here. They charged a fortune to come this far out. While we waited, she kept trying to talk to me, saying Monica had been wrong, that her mom had been wrong, that she saw that. Now, I told her this was exactly why we were done. This complete inability to respect boundaries or act like a rational adult. The cab showed up 45 minutes later. The driver looked uncomfortable picking up this soaking wet woman in oversized men's clothes with ruined makeup. I paid him in advance to take her to the nearest hotel 15 miles away. Told him to make sure she got inside safely. Monday morning, my lawyer Patricia called. Apparently, someone at the lake had seen the whole thing. Grace showing up drunk, the yelling, her falling in the water. Jake had mentioned it when he came up the next day. Said if I needed a witness statement, he could probably get one. Patricia said this could help our case significantly. Showed a pattern of instability and harassment. The divorce moved forward quickly after that. Grace had no grounds to contest it. No evidence of wrongdoing on my part, and no energy left to fight. We met once for mediation in late September. Divided everything 50-50 like Illinois law required. I kept my car and my 401k. She kept hers. We split the furniture, closed the joint accounts, and that was it. The judge signed the final papers in early November. About 7 months after that night, she told me not to touch her. 7 months after, she said she had self-respect. Last I heard, Grace was living with Monica, working some entry-level position at a bank, making around $40,000, spending her weekends posting inspirational quotes about strong women on social media. Her mom still sends me occasional emails with subject lines like, "You'll regret this," and I delete them without opening them. I'm in my own apartment now, 1 bedroom with decent light and a view of the city. I have my poker nights back twice a month. I hit the gym 5 times a week. And honestly, I've never felt more at peace. My friends say I look younger, happier, like someone lifted a weight off my shoulders. And they're right. I spent 5 years trying to make someone happy who decided being miserable with me was more satisfying than being happy alone. Grace wanted respect. She got it. I respected myself enough to walk away. Sometimes the best thing you can do for a marriage is end it. And sometimes the person who claims they have self-respect the loudest is the one who understands it the least. I learned that self-respect isn't about controlling someone else or making demands. It's about knowing your worth and not accepting less than you deserve. And the day I finally learned that lesson was the day I took my life back. What do you think about this story? Let me know in the comments. Drop a like and don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories.